This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. I'm Trever Shirin, and I am joined, as always, by Dr. Mark Mayfield.
How's it going?
It's going. We're episode into this recording session, and
things are working.
I'm a little bit more. Things are working. Super helpful. Today, speaking of things not working, today I want to talk about.
That was a good lead-in. I like that.
Working through disappointment. And I think, maybe this one will be involved in the What Do You Do With series of what do you do with the disappointment that you feel. We've had several episodes where we're talking about some emotional intelligence and exploring different feelings and how do we work through those feelings. So we encourage you to go and check those out. Today, we're going to be talking about disappointment.
That's disappointing.
Is it?
Yeah, that we're talking about disappointment.
I'm disappointed that you're disappointed. We could continue this all day.
This would be bad. Well, what is disappointment?
It's a really good question. I don't know if I have a good verbal definition of what disappointment is.
Well, I think part of it is, at least my understanding of my experiences of it, is it's a loss of expectation. Right? So we had these expectations of how something would look or how something would go, and we just, didn't happen. Or didn't happen the way that we wanted to, or exactly the way we wanted to.
Yeah.
But think about, what was the last disappointment you had in your life? And why was it a disappointment?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, and this is where it's hard to try to think of examples, because I think you and I have worked really hard over our last couple of years of, your education in the last, 10 decade or so of mine, where, you recognize those things and you work through them, and then they become part of your story, and you don't really remember them as disappointments, but you remember them as defining moments or growth moments or those kinds of things. But let's talk about that for a second, this idea of loss of expectation. Do you have any memory or any examples that you can think of that would be?
Yeah, I think, this is one that really hits home with me, and I think that I've experienced a whole lot of disappointment and experienced handling that well and poorly. And I think overall I've probably handled it more poorly than positively, but it's been shrouded as so. What I'm saying is, I for my 16th birthday, this is a terrible story. So I had just started at a new school.
Okay.
And I was homeschooled before that and really trying to learn some social skills and engage with people. Had a few friends and was close with everybody in my class because it was only a class of 32. And I was also friends with some upperclassmen, things like that. So I come to my 16th birthday, the big 16, and I send out invitations to everyone in my class because my mom was like, no, you don't get to exclude anyone.
Right.
You have to invite everyone. So I invite everybody from my class and a whole bunch of the class ahead of me. And my dad makes 10 pizzas expecting everybody to show up. And the only person who showed up was this guy that I didn't really get along with in high school. And he was the only one. And he stayed mostly because his mom obligated him to stay the entire time. But the disappointment that I felt having a birthday party where only one person showed up and it was somebody who didn't even want to be there was huge.
Your heart just dropped out of your...
Yeah. And that really hurt. And it was an echoing of a lot of other experiences in my childhood and in my high school life and even my adult life. I've had echoes of that same kind of disappointment when I'm really excited for something and nobody shows up. And the negative way that I've learned to handle that disappointment is to anticipate the disappointment.
Oh, right. That's a coping skill that we all, not a good one, but.
And it seems healthy at the moment because then I don't feel disappointed. But then at the same time, I have no expectations of people that can be really beneficial to say Mark is such a great guy, and I know that he cares about me and he cares about the things that I'm doing. And I told him that I would love for him to be there, and he said he would be there. So I'm going to expect that he'll be there.
Right.
Rather than, Mark's not going to show up.
Right. I'll be surprised if he does.
Right.
Right.
Which is so cynical, but it's a self-defense mechanism.
It is. And I can just, I'm like, man, that would suck putting myself in your shoes, because the expectation, right? Of what were your expectations of the party?
To have a great time, to make some more friends, to be able to hang out with people that were new. And, because I had been in the school for almost a full year at that point. And so it seemed reasonable
that people would show up. And the expectation was all of that. And so the disappointment was the moment you realized that wasn't happening. Right?
Yeah.
So that loss of expectation.
Totally.
Did your parents try to help you rationalize it?
I think so. My mom was definitely probably more affected by it than I was, because this was her son who was in a new environment. And so she still tears up when I tell the story. And I'm at the point where I can laugh about it because I think it is a meaningful story and something people can relate to. But yeah, there was some, I don't think there was any rationalization of oh, they were probably busy or all this. It was just wow, that sucks.
Yeah. And this is after your
I think this was after I had attempted suicide that fall, and then in the spring I had the party. So it's
can you catch a break? Good grief. I'd have been there.
Yeah,
if I would,
it's rough, but as we've been talking about how mental health is not the suicide attempts and the crazy people in a mental ward and all of that. That's included in it. But
sure, that's persistently.
Also,
that's the consistently and persistently mentally ill.
Yeah, but also what's in it is disappointment, failure, and loss. Something that everyone has experienced. Maybe you didn't experience not having anybody show up to your 16th birthday party, but you've experienced disappointment, and that is part of mental health, especially dependent on how we engage with it afterwards.
So we've had these conversations a lot with individuals like Susan Payne from Safe to Tell and others in the community where we've not lowered the threshold. Not lowered the threshold in the sense that everybody with failure, loss, and disappointment needs to go see a counselor.
Right.
But we don't give credence to failure, loss, and disappointment, that it's actually something that needs to be sat with and dealt with and worked through, because we find, and we'll talk about this, in future episodes, but the fact that the majority of individuals that are choosing to die by suicide are dealing with failure, loss, and disappointment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they come across as these kids that don't have any issues at all, or no real big mental health issues. Now, again, I'm giving broad strokes to that, and that's it's more nuanced. But what happens when we don't ever learn to deal with our disappointment? So, when that scenario at your 16th birthday, how'd you work through it?
I honestly don't remember. I think that was probably when I made that switch of I don't expect anything from anyone anymore.
Right.
So it's putting aside all expectation, which I think was self-protective.
Right.
But also
to fault you for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of us do that.
Right.
But I think at the same time, there's an unhealthy side of that where now there are times where I'll have really close friends and it's hard for me to believe in them when they say something because I want to protect myself from being disappointed. And I can see this in other people where, I may not have a sad demeanor while I'm putting aside those expectations, but I've met people who do.
Right.
And so it's all right, well, we'll see if you show up. And
sarcastic and kind of almost fatalistic and
totally.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, now I really don't want to come.
Right. Wow.
Great.
Wow,
that's
thanks.
how you're going to treat me.
That sounds like fun. Well, I was thinking too, as you're talking, as a 16-year-old, and I think our listeners are putting themselves in your shoes going, man, I'd have been there. I'm so sorry. But we think about other things too, like we apply for a job and we didn't get, or I think loss of expectation. I'm thinking about my own life, and I will say this first off, I'm very grateful for my family and the fact that I've got two beautiful daughters and a wonderful wife, and we have a great family and great. My expectation was we're going to have 4 kids, and by this time in my life, I'd have 4 kids under the age of 11 or whatever.
Yeah,
and I think different, there was a different plan, and I didn't handle the disappointment well in between. So my oldest is 11, my youngest is 5.5. And I was hoping that we'd have at least one more in between there, or two more, and when that didn't happen, I got bitter, I got angry, I was disappointed, but it turned into a lot more like dangerous emotions, where I even questioned my own faith. I questioned a lot of different things of like, this is what I've desired for so long. Why isn't this happening? And that's when I had, wrestled a lot, but I had good people in my life that would challenge me on those things. And so I didn't stay stuck. I could have very easily, I'm stubborn. I could have very easily stayed stuck, like, no, I'm going to do it my way. And like with you, the expectation, I'm just going to pretend that like nothing, like it's always not going to happen the way I want to. And so you can stay stuck that way. And I know that I have a tendency to go that way. And I'm sure you probably know you have a tendency to go that way as well, but we're aware of it.
Right.
But disappointment is real, and I think I can imagine some of our listeners going, well, my parents just told me to get over it, or stop crying. What do you have? You have many things to think about that are great, or these placations. When there's a disappointment because of a loss of a child, and the stupid things that we say about, well, at least there's another star in heaven, or at least you could have more kids, or instead of going, that really sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry. Yeah. And let's sit together in this disappointment for a little while.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the scene in Inside Out. When nothing is going Joy's way, trying to get back to headquarters because Riley's just having a rough time, and she's pushing off sadness and pushing off sadness and pushing off sadness, and then she realizes, because of sitting with the magical character or whatever, and letting him cry. And he goes, oh, I feel better now. It's that idea that sitting with our disappointment and our sadness, the failure, loss, and disappointment piece actually is healthy. Yeah. And how we work through it instead of just pushing that aside.
Being able to sit and embrace it a little bit, which is hard. I think of in The Office, there's a scene where Michael Scott he's broken up with his girlfriend.
We went from Inside Out to The Office. I love this.
It has more mental health aspects than you'd think. It's just examples of bad mental health. That's awesome. But he has this line that I think is really, really funny, where he's going through the pain of a breakup, and then he's like, no doubt about it, I'm ready to be hurt again. And I think there's a beautiful side of that with disappointment, to be able to say, no doubt about it,
let's do this.
I'm ready to be hurt again if that happens.
Right.
And preparing yourself in the way of grit and resiliency to say, all right, if nobody shows up to this event, I'm okay. Like it's fine. Really hope they do, though.
Right.
And I'm going to hold on to that excitement and that expectation, as long as it's reasonable, but still being able to be hopeful, I think, has so much beauty and courage and strength involved with it.
So how would that look?
I think it looks like putting yourself into situations where there is a moderate amount of risk of disappointment, and beforehand having people around you that you can turn to if you are disappointed, and having things in place where you can say, okay, I know that if I get turned down for this job interview, that I can go and I can get some ice cream at Rizzuto's, and then I will call my wife and I will talk to her and say, hey babe, I didn't get the job. It sucks. I'm really disappointed, frustrated, blah, blah, blah. Having those in place, and then being able to go with that same amount of excitement, knowing that if it doesn't go the way you hope it does, you've already got plans in place.
Well, right. And I think too, recognizing, you just said, sit with that for a minute, recognize what it is, sit with it for a minute or a day or two. But you think about when disappointment happens, if we actually sit with it, it goes away quicker than if we try to deny it or ignore it, because then it comes back up in very ugly ways that ruin a lot more things than just...
Well, and if you listen to last week's episode, we talked a lot about this idea of radical acceptance, or just accepting that something has happened and moving forward, having some agency in that. And I think that concept applies here as well.
Well, it's interesting as we continue in our podcasting, how many things really cross over.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And it's not a bad thing. And I think it's good for our listeners to hear, but I think it's interesting how we go from, well, we're trying to keep it to this concept, but it bleeds over to this concept and it bleeds over to that concept. And I think those are fantastic things.
Yeah. I think of our lives and our mental health as a lot like a spider's web where everything's interconnected and we need every part of it to do its job in order to hold the shape that we need it to. And I think that when you pluck on one thing, it can affect something so different in a different arena.
It's the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so it's important for us to have that reflection of like, oh, I plucked this. I didn't realize that thing from my 16th birthday party was going to come up because of this. And
You're
then
26 years old and over here weeping in the corner because you haven't dealt with it. Yeah.
Right. And then being able to say, okay, so maybe I need to go to somebody who can take a different perspective of what I'm going through and to look at it and say, oh, so it looked like when this thing was plucked, it affected that memory of you as a 16-year-old. Let's explore that a little bit and make sure that you're in a place where you're healthy and your web is strong. I'm
also hearing though that we can't do this in isolation. And we try to all the time, especially mental health. Like mental health really drives me. I mean, the way we look at mental health in our country is is a very isolating thing. Yeah. And we're doing a lot of work at Mayfield Counseling, but Colorado Springs is doing a lot of work. El Paso County, even the state of Colorado is doing a lot of work around reframing that kind of stuff. How do we get away from living in isolation and experiencing these things in isolation? And though I believe disappointment needs to be worked through on an individual level, it should not be done in isolation.
Yeah.
Let people in, don't suffer in silence.
Right. Because I think isolation can be disappointment too. I think the two are very closely linked. And if I had experienced that 16th birthday party and my parents hadn't been involved, how much more would that have affected me than having my parents there, able to say, well, we're going to put all the pizza in a Tupperware and you can have it for lunch.
But to see your mom and dad ticked off as well.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of validated. Okay. They're feeling it too. They're, maybe on their own.
I wasn't alone.
For me but it was.
And I did have that one guy, Patrick, who came to the party.
Good job, Patrick.
Good job, Patrick.
That's funny. Well, it's good that you can laugh about this now. I mean, that was a decade ago.
Yeah.
But still, it probably touches parts of you that are,
Yeah, I think if I really start to think about it and sit with it, there are definitely echoes, like I mentioned before, that they come up sometimes, and I have to check it and sit with it and say, okay, I'm feeling this disappointment. I'm feeling some of that cynicism. I feel really hurt. How am I going to go about working through this? Not just getting over, because that doesn't lead to anything.
Get through.
But getting through, working through, working on.
Well, that's where I think we allow our history, our experiences to inform our present. And if we've not worked through some stuff, it's going to inform our present in a way that is not healthy.
Yeah.
But if we can go, okay, this feels familiar because this is how I felt at my 16th birthday. And here's how I handled it then. And I didn't like that, so I'm going to do something different now. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think just for our listeners, to encourage them to, like, how do you handle failure, loss, and disappointment? And today, disappointment, how do you handle expectations, loss of expectation, or expectations not happening the way that you want them to? And I think for many of us, it's the first time that you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
So let us know if you need anything. We'd love to hear from you, and maybe pull in some good people in your life to walk through and talk through these things.
Yeah. And if you don't have anybody in your life that's able to do that, we encourage you to give us a call. We'd love to connect you with somebody who is here to care and has gone through, oh my gosh, so much effort to be able to care for you.
Trevor's right in the middle of that.
Yeah, I thought about making a video that's just a rant of like, listen, your counselor has gone through this, and this just to care for you. But it is true. Like we've chosen this field because we feel like there's a part of us that is called to care. And so when you enter into our space and into the counseling office, that's our role, is just to care for you, to be there for you, and to help support you along the way. We're not here to give you the fix or the solution or the advice, but we are here to care. And so if you feel a lack of that in your life, I encourage you to reach out.
Yep.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.